What's up guys, this is Darkbblue, a gamer who loves Souls-like games, looter games, and every game that involves build making. FromSoft, the developer of Souls series, has always been reusing designs from previous games in their new games. Even in their latest game, Elden Ring, you can find something familiar in Demon's Souls. By discovering such relations between Elden Ring and previous Souls games, maybe we can have a deeper understanding of Elden Ring. So let's do this now, especially focusing on combat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's dive right into it. Souls games are a quite special genre in RPG, and this special feeling has much to do with the combat. More specifically, you can find 3 combat styles in Elden Ring, which are in fact the exact 3 combat styles throughout the entire Souls genre. The first combat style is more related to the action part of the RPG. You need to observe and memorize how enemies attack, how you can dodge them, and how you can fight back. Eventually, you can outscale your foes. In this combat style, enemies are the focus of your entire attention. In comparison, more traditional action games put more emphasis on the character you control. This character can perform very insane moves, but you also need to spend much time practicing it. On the other hand, your character has only a few moves in Souls games, but the enemies are fiercer. Thanks to this design, Souls games are more difficult than traditional action games if your goal is to beat the game, but Souls games are much easier if you want to master them. This difficulty is carefully tuned such that you can get a feeling of achievement. The second combat style is more related to the RPG part of the RPG. You can build your character with every possible tool you have and thus outlevel your enemies. When your character has strong damage output or survivability, you as a player no longer need to memorize enemies' moves. So this is an entirely different combat style from the first one. Then the third combat style is puzzling. Sometimes the enemies are specially designed to include puzzles. For example, to kill some furnace golems in DLC, you need to throw pots from a high ground. Sometimes you can make use of stuns and enemies' fixed movesets to stun lock bosses, to design a highly reproducible combat process. I think this is also puzzling combat, when enemies are not specially designed to include puzzles. Now recall your experience in Elden Ring and see if your combat can be divided into the 3 types. Sometimes you memorize enemies' moveset, sometimes you instead build your character or summon spirit ashes to outlevel enemies, and sometimes the combat feels more like doing a puzzle. Now I can tell you, the 3 styles are not unique to Elden Ring. They are what people have been playing through the entire Souls series. Now let me show you more details in the rest of this video. What's the memorizing combat style like in old Souls games? In Demon's Souls, some bosses, such as Flame Lurker and Man-Eater, are not designed with special mechanics, so they are fought by memorizing every move and thus outscaling them. Although you can find the same combat style in both Demon's Souls and Elden Ring, they don't feel quite the same with regard to details. That's correct, they are sometimes different, but how? Let's say one boss has 5 moves and another has 10 moves. Of course, the one with 10 moves gives harder fight. To make the game harder, you will give bosses more and more moves. But how should the boss decide which move to use among so many moves? This decision mechanic has becoming more and more complex from Demon's Souls to Elden Ring, and this is why you feel the difference. At the beginning, bosses randomly choose a move, but well, you know it's not a good idea. For example, you can design a long-distance leaping attack, but well, it'll look very silly if the boss uses this attack even when the player is near it, so this move should only be used when the player is far away. Indeed, the next step of move decision is adding special conditions, making some moves only selected in certain conditions. This design can be seen roughly in Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Now let's move one step further. Players can and actually have analyzed these conditions and found that you can intentionally create certain conditions such as bosses only use very few moves. In this way, although our goal is to make enemies smarter, they in fact are easier to be fooled. So the next advancement is to make enemies choose a group of moves instead of one move given a certain condition. This is vastly utilized in Sekiro. For example, after enemies imperfectly parry your attack, they can only choose from a subset of their entire moveset. And after perfect parrying, they choose from a different subset. Note that one subset consists of multiple attack moves, so to make the enemy less predictable. In this way, although you can still analyze and hack the conditional decision process, enemies look less like as if they are fooled. Now we move to Elden Ring and we'll see the decision process has been made more complex. In Elden Ring, the attack of enemies are made into combos, and furthermore, in made combo, enemies can transition to different combo finishers, so combos are highly flexible. By comparison, in previous Souls games, combos are mostly fixed. This design makes enemies even smarter, and at the same time, you still have the chance to analyze and hack the decision process. Admittedly, some players don't quite like the memorizing combat style in Elden Ring, as it feels too hard. This feeling comes not from the complex decision process, but from the fact that enemy moves are now stronger and harder to dodge. Now you need to combine rolling, sprinting, jumping, and maybe sometimes even dodging skills to completely avoid being attacked. Such difficulty has somehow gone beyond the balance in previous Souls games, making the memorizing combat style more painful and less enjoying. Nevertheless, I still think the decision mechanic in Elden Ring is indeed better than before. In conclusion, from Demon Souls to Elden Ring, the first combat style has been steadily evolving. Now what about the RPG out-leveling combat style? In Demon Souls, Firestorm is so powerful that you can one-tap many bosses. Enchanted Blue Blood Sword is also able to deal tons of damage. Using these builds, you no longer have to memorize enemy movesets. From Demon Souls to Elden Ring, this combat style hasn't changed much. There are indeed more gears to choose from, but the essence stays the same. So far we have covered the evolution of two combat styles. The memorizing moveset style has seen steady evolution, while the RPG out-leveling style hasn't changed much. But what about the puzzling combat style? Next, you will see huge changes. As I have said, the puzzling combat style can come in two forms. Sometimes the enemies are especially designed to include puzzles, and sometimes you manually utilize all kinds of mechanics to stunlock a common boss. In Demon Souls, the former is the majority. For example, Dragon God is a pure puzzling boss, and Tower Knight requires you to attack his feet to knock him down. So what's the problem with puzzling? It makes you feel you are solving a puzzle instead of being engaged in an intense combat. To solve this problem, FromSoft has made huge changes, starting from Bloodborne, to make puzzles less explicit. Specifically in Bloodborne, giant bosses consist of several body parts that each can be broken to create huge stuns. Given this mechanic, you can plan well in what order you break each body part so that the boss is stun-locked throughout the entire combat. This is still doing puzzles, but you feel engaged in intense combat, which shows the new design's advantage. From explicit puzzles to stun locking, this is still the puzzling combat style, but it has evolved so much. In fact, I think the stun locking design in Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 is a great contribution to the Souls genre. However, Elden Ring takes one step back. On one hand, there are more explicit puzzles than in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, trying to balance explicit puzzles and stun locking. On the other, in Elden Ring, stun locking relies mainly on stuns, while in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne it relies on damage. We know, you can easily increase your damage output, but not stuns. So in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, a specific stun locking process designed in New Game Plus 0 is likely to apply to New Game Plus 7 as well. But in Elden Ring, a specific stun locking method can hardly be extended, since the enemy stance keeps increasing in New Game Plus. Now let's put the three combat styles together and see how they interrelate. Back in previous Souls games, they are quite independent or disconnected. For example, in Dark Souls 3, quite many bosses can be stun locked using the same methods that apply to both New Game Plus 0 and New Game Plus 7, making it, well, meaningless to try other combat styles with these bosses. And if I intend to wield Street Sword and do the memorizing moveset thing, I won't pay much attention to my build and damage output. One huge advancement in Elden Ring is that now the three combat styles are more related together. Since stun locking methods are harder to extend now, you need to additionally consider tuning your build. And when complete stun locking is not feasible, you also need to memorize some movesets. Furthermore, for another example, when you try to memorize movesets, what build you are using also matters, as different builds might tackle the same attack differently. In fact, I think it's important to understand the combination of three combat styles. This understanding helps you to overcome harder bosses more easily. If you like my story or want to join me into depth of games, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.